Hi everybody and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to make Thor's hammer. The model I'm going to be using for this project is from user quintunesp on Thingiverse. Now it is in one piece, so I had to chop it up in Mesh Mixer in order for it to fit on my Ender 3. But if you have a larger printer like a CR10, you might be able to get away with printing it whole. I still wouldn't do this though. I printed out the handle in two parts, making sure to avoid cutting through any details. Then I sanded the sides that would be glued together and marked the matching ends. After that, I taped together the two parts and squeezed in some of this Gorilla Glue gel. I sanded down the entire handle, putting extra time into any seams or gaps. These files proved to be pretty useful as well for this project, as they allowed me to smooth around small gaps and curves. I then hit it all with several light coats of primer, using a high grit sandpaper between coats. It's important not to rush this step because it will lead to a much higher quality product in the end. Once it was dry, I applied 4 or 5 coats of this brown spray paint, waiting 2 or 3 minutes between coats. It's important to use light coats here to prevent unwanted dripping or spots. After the paint is fully dried, tape around the area you intend on painting. Don't use a super strong tape here, and even if you're using regular painter's tape, I'd suggest sticking it first to your shirt so that the paint doesn't rip off. Once it is well taped, apply 3 to 5 light layers of the black undercoat. The shinier this is, the shinier the silver finish will be. Let it dry for several hours. Then, evenly apply 2 to 3 light coats of the silver paint, waiting a few minutes in between. Apply a thick layer of tape around the areas you want to paint, and press in the edges with an X-Acto knife. It can be helpful to use lots of little pieces instead of a couple of big pieces. Like before, apply multiple even layers of the black undercoat. All of the paints I use for this project can be found in the description. And again, after letting it thoroughly dry, giving it several light coats of silver paint. Then, after a slow but satisfying removal of the tape, the handle was finally done. Moving on, I printed out the two halves of the head. Printing the second one a bit slower and with supports was definitely a good idea, and I probably should have done it for both, but I was running low on filament and didn't feel like restarting an 18-hour print. I filled some minor gaps with wood filler and sanded it all down. There was a small gap in the print, so I cut a thin piece of foam core to fit inside of it and glued it in place. Since there was no infill, I glued in a bunch of these wooden dowels for added strength and rigidity. I designed some plates to cover these wobbly ends, so I applied glue to each face and weighed them down. Then I cut some small pieces from a popsicle stick and glued one to each half, clamping it in place. After that, I put a line of glue around the entire piece, making sure not to add any oversized globs that would cause trouble sanding later. Here I used my putty knife to spread some wood filler into any cracks or holes in the print and sanded it smooth. This one edge didn't print well at all, so I put extra filler on in this area. Then, to smooth it all out, kept the file square to the rest of the print. Next, I primed the whole hammer and smoothed it out with some steel wool. Then I covered the whole thing with a black undercoat, keeping it on these feet so I could get to the entire thing. There were some marks from the feet, and I easily covered them with some acrylic paint. After it was completely dry, I applied the metallic paint, going as light as possible in slightly overlapping strokes. After letting it dry for a full 24 hours, I began filing down the face where the head connects to the handle in order to make a fully flat surface. Then I thoroughly glued it in place and clamped the pieces together. I added a ring of glue around the connection for extra strength. And finally, I wiped away any excess glue. So it's finally done, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. It's far from perfect, but I think it's still pretty cool. The metallic paint came out great, and this model is just insane. However, there are a few things I would have done differently if I were to do this project again. One is reprinting this half of the head. I never added supports right here, so it didn't come out perfectly. Two is sacrificing an entire roll of filament. I think it would have come out better if I used infill. And three would be to add pins and holes to make connecting the pieces easier. But overall, it looks and feels pretty great. As long as you're willing to spend some time, I'd consider this a pretty easy project. And I'd also consider this proof that you can make something cool even on a small printer. Most likely, you'll be spending somewhere between $30 and $50 on this project, and you'll most likely have some material left over. But that really isn't terrible, considering that I found some online worth more than $100. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm going to be posting more videos soon, so subscribe if you want to see those. If you did enjoy the video, it would help if you hit that like button. Also, if you have any suggestions or ideas for a project, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. Thanks for watching. I forgot to add supports. Oh my gosh, if I would have used some more info. I think, so subscribe.